Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us, and welcome to our monthly webinar series for the National Park Service's Connected Conservation Initiative, which was formerly known as Scaling Up. My name is Brian Fainer, and I help support the effort. Our Connected Conservation webinars focus on how NPS staff and partners can use various tools and strategies to conserve NPS resources at the landscape and seascape level. We host a webinar at least once a month, and you can find recordings of past webinars on our internal Connected Conservation Toolkit, which is accessible to all DOI staff and also on the Network for Landscape for Conservation website. You can find links to both of these resources in our chat box. We will be posting this webinar following our presentation today. Throughout the presentation, please feel free to plug in questions into the questions box on your right. We will host a question and answer session following the presentation and read aloud any questions gathered in the question box. At that time, we will also open up the phone lines for you to speak up and ask any questions. So with that, today's presenter is Joan Harn and Mary Riddle with the Park Service, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hello, and thanks for inviting me for this webinar. I'm Joan Harn. I'm the River Programs Manager for the Park Service's Conservation Outdoor Recreation Programs Office in DC. And I share leadership for the Park Service's Wild and Scenic River Program with Jennifer Back, who is a hydrologist with the Water Resources Division in Fort Collins. Unfortunately, Jennifer's not able to join today. She's doing some water quality sampling up in North Dakota at Teddy Roosevelt. So before we do more introductions and talk more about what we're going to be talking about today, I want to start with an inspirational film about the Noatak River in Alaska and the importance of the Wild and Scenic River designation for protecting subsistence resources. It's 7.5 minutes long. You'll be able to control the sound on your own computer. And after the film, we'll go back to the presentation. I'll introduce our objectives and the other participants. Okay, we're back, but my screen's not advancing. So hang on a second for a technical challenge here. There we go. So again, I'm Joan Harn with the co-lead for the Park Service Wild and Scenic Rivers program. Presenting with me today is going to be Mary Riddle, talking a little bit about the Flathead. And on the line, we also have Zach Babb, who was featured in the film that you just saw, and Sarah Bursky from the Partnership Wild and Scenic Rivers will be helping answer some questions later on. So in today's presentation, I want to introduce the Park Service's Wild and Scenic Rivers responsibilities, describe some of the fundamentals of the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act, and get into a few of the concepts and tools that are used for conserving river resources. We'll describe the benefits of designated rivers through the films and the presentation on the Flathead that Mary will do, and then identify some resources to learn more and answer your questions. So Park Service is one of 4 agencies with responsibilities for the National Wild and Scenic River System. We share responsibilities with the Forest Service, Bureau of Land Management, Fish and Wildlife Service for 208 designated rivers in 40 states and Puerto Rico. We work together through the Interagency Wild and Scenic River Coordinating Council to promote consistency. But the Park Service Wild and Scenic Rivers are all located throughout the U.S. We have a range of responsibilities depending on the administrative nature of the river. And it's pretty complicated, and I'm not going to go into the details here, but you can learn more about that by looking at our website or the Director's Order 46 that lays out the different roles and responsibilities that we have. So the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act was established in 1968. It was intended to balance dam building and other water resources development. And it was all about protecting free flow and water quality and other special river values. A little consideration was given to the broader ecological context. This was an era of new environmental laws like the Wilderness Act and the Land and Water Conservation Act, which were passed in 1964. There was a lot of federal support for recreation, the Outdoor Recreation Act, and then emerging environmental awareness with the publication of Silent Spring in 1962. So 2018 marks the 50th anniversary. We're trying to use that to leverage increased awareness, better stewardship, and improve communication. I don't want to go into a lot of the details about the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act, but I do want to give you a big picture of some of the key concepts. So the National Wild and Scenic River System was established to preserve certain rivers with outstanding natural, cultural, and recreational values in a free-flowing condition for the enjoyment of present and future generations. It established a national policy to protect certain rivers from dams, diversions, and other construction. The Act is notable for safeguarding the special character of these rivers while also recognizing the potential for their appropriate use and development. Only certain types of new hydropower projects are actually prohibited. Other constructions must meet the Wild and Scenic River standards. It encourages river management that crosses political boundaries and promotes public participation in developing goals for river protection. So, as you all know, rivers and streams are enormously important for sustaining the natural and human environment. Rivers support ecological systems and protect biodiversity. There was a 2012 study published in the journal Inland Water that found that in the western U.S., 90% of bird species and 60% of all wildlife species spend some or all of their life stages in river-related habitats. Another factoid, the average distance an American citizen lives from a river is a little over 2 miles. And so, but only a very small proportion, less than 1/3 of 1% of the nation's rivers have been designated into this National Wild and Scenic River System. Many, many more miles of rivers have been altered. The congressional intent is to protect and enhance the values and immediate environments for which the rivers are added to the national system. The focus is on free flow, water quality, and outstandingly remarkable values as described in the next 3 slides. Free flow is defined in the Act to mean existing or flowing in natural condition without impoundment, diversion, straightening, riprapping, or other modification of the waterway. The definition goes on to say that existing low dams, diversion works, and other minor structures don't necessarily bar inclusion of the system. However, note that free flow is not the same as a natural flow regime. Concern about pollution was a prime motivator for passage of the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act. However, water quality is not a criteria for inclusion in the system. The Act directs the river administering agency to work with EPA and appropriate state agencies to eliminate or diminish water pollution in the river. This year, we're doing the first comprehensive analysis of water quality in the National Wild and Scenic River System, and we found that a large portion of the rivers have water quality impairments based on EPA and state total maximum daily load data, and that many rivers actually lack data. We found that only 18% have documented good water quality from this analysis. And it's something we want to work on in anticipation of the 50th anniversary of the Clean Water Act in 2022. Generally, the sources of this impairment are outside the river corridor, and factors influencing that impairment include land use, both past and present, as well as atmospheric deposition. And the next steps that we want to be taking is to work through a watershed approach and water quality management plans in cooperation with the entities that are most responsible for water quality. The Act uses the term outstandingly remarkable values, or ORVs, to encompass the special natural, cultural, and recreational values that are to be protected and enhanced. These values are defined as part of the study and planning process and must be river-related and of regional or national significance. An important directive of the Act is to protect and enhance the river values. This protection goes beyond the NPS Organic Act, which prevents impairment of resource values. The Wild and Scenic Rivers Act has a non-degradation and enhancement mandate. But we recognize that this term ORV is not the easiest concept to garner political support, and we're now exploring how we can discuss river values in terms of ecosystem service framework and benefits, things like water security, flood resilience, ecotourism, biodiversity, and not just a list of values like fish, wildlife, recreation, scenery, and cultural values that are marked in the Act itself. Now I'd like to talk about some key concepts. The Wild and Scenic Rivers Act is easier to understand if you look at it in terms of some of the big ideas that are incorporated. These basic concepts are found in all the regulations, policies, manuals, and guidance that shape the federal agency and partner work on wild and scenic rivers. These concepts are a few of the highlights from an online training series that the Interagency Wild and Scenic River Coordinating Council is currently creating. So first concept, rivers really attract human development. For example, water storage is essential for agriculture, electricity generation, and municipal use. In addition, infrastructure projects such as road crossings, pipeline crossings, bank stabilization can threaten river-related values. The water quality of a river and the flow rates in a river are impacted by all the activities within its watershed. And if these development pressures are to be balanced with the need to protect river-related values, especially the need to keep certain rivers free-flowing, then vigorous protection is needed. Since the federal government is involved with such a high percentage of these projects that could potentially impact rivers, this protection needs to come from all federal agencies. And there are provisions in the Act to prohibit construction of new hydropower projects and ensure that new federally assisted water resources projects do not adversely affect these wild and scenic river values. These protections apply to projects within the designated river corridor, as well as on projects upstream, downstream, and on tributaries. However, it's mostly limited to projects that take place below the ordinary high water mark. The next concept, rivers frequently cross lands owned and managed by multiple parties. And these parties include federal, state, and local governments, tribes, private individuals, corporations, or nonprofit groups. In addition, laws and regulations concerning river management, such as those controlling land use, water use, wildlife management, are implemented by a large array of government entities. Poorly planned actions by one government agency or one landowner can easily degrade an entire river corridor. And a coordinated approach is necessary for addressing all of the potential threats to river-related resources. The Wild and Scenic Rivers Act has provisions for encouraging cooperative management. It directs all federal agencies to support wild and scenic river protections, especially those with responsibilities on adjacent lands. The Act has broad authorities for all federal agencies to work with any organization or individual to plan, protect, and manage river resources. And this applies to all rivers, not just to those that are designated. The last concept that I want to highlight is that the Wild and Scenic Rivers system is intended to grow as other rivers are identified as worthy. Federal land management agencies should therefore consider whether rivers located on the lands they manage could be eligible and suitable for designation. The Act requires careful analysis of river management alternatives whenever federal agencies make land use and water use decisions regarding rivers. Land managers should protect the values until a decision is made to include the river into the national system, and Park Service management policies address this issue. So to summarize, the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act is our most powerful river protection tool. It includes a mandate to protect and enhance river values. It's stronger than the Park Service Organic Act mandate to prevent resource impairment. It has tools to avoid adverse effects on river values from new activities within designated river segments, as well as from effects of certain federally assisted projects upstream, downstream, or on tributaries of rivers. And the Wild and Scenic River designation protects rivers by barring new hydropower projects and construction below the ordinary high water mark that would adversely affect the values. It establishes a non-degradation standard for wild and scenic river values. It requires development of a comprehensive river management plan to address resource protection, user capacity, the need for facilities. It authorizes limited land acquisition. It creates a federal reserve water right. And it authorizes cooperation and assistance with states, communities, NGOs, and land owners to achieve river conservation goals. So now I'd like to show a 3-minute trailer for a film about partnership wild and scenic rivers, where there is essentially little or no federal land involved. And that will be followed by Mary Riddle presenting about the Flathead and Glacier. Okay, now I'm going to turn over the presentation to Mary Riddle at Glacier National Park.
Hi, thanks for this opportunity. I'm gonna talk a little bit. I just have a few slides to talk about the Flathead Wild and Scenic River, primarily as an example of connecting kind of at a large landscape. So this map on the screen shows you Glacier National Park in the center in green, surrounded by an area that we refer to as the Crown of the Continent ecosystem, which is about 18 million acres. Go to the next map. Next slide. And I apologize for this slide. It's a little, I was having technical difficulties this morning. The Flathead Wild and Scenic River is made up of 3 forks that were all designated in 1976. The North Fork, which is shown in pink on that map on the screen, forms the western boundary between Glacier and the Flathead National Forest, and the Middle Fork, which is shown in orange on the screen, is the southern boundary of the park and the Flathead National Forest. South Fork, which is shown in green, lies within designated wilderness in the Flathead National Forest, and all 3 forks make up that designation. There's about 219 miles, and interestingly enough, this river was the river that inspired the Wild and Scenic River Act. It is not only is it federal land that it flows through, but through many of these sections, like the North Fork in the pink there is private land, both on the North Fork and the Middle Fork as well. So like the film just talked about, it's a mix of jurisdictions that it flows through. Next slide. Great. So the Flathead Wild and Scenic River is jointly managed by Glacier National Park and the forest. There's an MOU between the park and the forest that guides this management, and we jointly conduct patrols, monitor resources and visitor use, and conduct surveys for various types of research. There are monthly forest supervisor and superintendent meetings, and then annual leadership and river management trips that take place. The forest works with 3 different district rangers within the park, so the management of the Wild and Scenic River in the park is spread out through many different staff. Doesn't just sit in one division or area. Next. We are working on a joint comprehensive river management plan, and to be completed in 2021. The Flathead National Forest is the lead on this process, and we're beginning by doing a collaborative process, which is used by the Forest Service a lot early in their planning, and this is prior to NEPA starting. So there are public meetings that are being held on a monthly basis. We're in our 3rd meeting right now on the outstanding remarkable values that Joan referred to. The ones that have been identified for the Flathead are the subject of the meetings, and this is where we're using these meetings to present baseline information and data and trends if they're known, and then have the public identify issues and concerns and have discussions with the park and the forest specialists about the aspects of the river that they're concerned about or interested in. The issues that the plan will be addressing are increasing visitor use, human waste, invasives, aquatic invasives particularly, and then residential development along the river banks, particularly in the North Fork. And then also we'll deal with the fact that between the forest and the park, there are different regulations and facilities that are provided for the public to use the river. So, for example, camping in the forest doesn't require a permit, and in the park it does. Dogs are allowed in the forest, but not in the park. So it gets a little, it's confusing for the public as well as for the agencies. Next slide. We're going to start this NEPA process for the Joint Management Plan in 2019, and are looking forward to getting that going, but getting a lot of public interest right now. In addition, based on the first map I showed you that we sit in the middle of this larger ecosystem, there was a memorandum of understanding signed by the province of British Columbia, by the Premier and the Governor of Montana in 2010 that spoke to environmental protection, climate action, and energy management and production within the entire Flathead River Basin, which expands into Canada. The Flathead River actually begins in Canada. This MOU recognizes a shared common border and acts on a 2003 environmental cooperation arrangement that recognized the transboundary Flathead River and the significance of Waterton Glacier International Peace Park as a World Heritage Site and a biosphere reserve. The MOU essentially commits both the province and the state to work together to remove mining, oil and gas and coal development in the river basin, cooperate on fish and wildlife management, and collaborate on cross-border projects that have the potential to harm land or water resources. Next slide. It also, we collaborate, it directs collaborative response to emergencies and speaks to adaptation, developing adaptation measures to climate change, reducing greenhouse gases, and pursuing cooperative, clean, and renewable transboundary energy policies. Montana and British Columbia also it speaks to, for both Montana and BC, to partner with tribes and First Nations, local governments, and leaders from business, environmental advocates, and scientists to accomplish these goals. The Ktunaxa First Nation actually signed the agreement as a witness, and this is a very important thing to them, and it means that they also feel very responsible for carrying out this MOU. To date, the results of the MOU have been that the U.S. Congress retired the mining leases in the North Fork, and British Columbia agreed to not permit any new energy development in mines. There are some current coal mines and a gold mine and some very small development of natural gas, but otherwise no new energy development is going into the North Fork Basin in British Columbia. So the purpose for talking about this was to show not only are we working cooperatively and collaboratively with the U.S. Forest Service in the United States to manage the Flathead Wild and Scenic River, but we're also working with the state and the province of British Columbia to protect at this transboundary, transnation level. So it's a good example of successfully managing at a large landscape level for this resource. And that's it.
Thank you, Mary. So I just wanted to close with a slide that shows a number of resources, and I think that Cass was going to add those to the chat, those links that you can't click on your slide, what you're seeing there. I think one of the key things that I wanted to point out on this, though, is that we do have a Park Service Wild and Scenic Steering Committee, and there are regional representatives, and you can find out who your information source is for that by going to the nps.gov/WSR Wild and Scenic River Program webpage. And I think what I'd like to do now is just really close and open it up for questions. And if there's time, we could go through some of these resources if people are interested. Just highlighting on the top is there are a number of other films that have been produced both by the Park Service and our federal agency and nonprofit partners to help acknowledge and celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act. And there's a full page of them and links, and you can see also the more detailed Partnership Wild and Scenic River film, of which you just saw the trailer for this. When we get to questions, note that Zach Babb, who was heavily featured on the NOAA film, is on the phone and available to answer questions as well. So let's switch over to the questions. Try again. I don't have the right touch here.
Go, try it again. All right. Well, thank you so much, Joan and Mary, for a great presentation. As a reminder, folks, before we open up the phone lines, if you have a question you'd rather type into the questions box on the far right interface that you have on your computer, feel free to do that. Looks like we don't have any questions yet, but I'm sure they'll come. I have, I guess, a softball question for you and Mary to start us off with. What is the biggest challenge facing the system for those wild and scenic rivers that are surrounded predominantly by public lands, and then those designated rivers that are predominantly surrounded by private lands?
I guess I'll take a stab at it first, Joan. Is that public lands, I think visitation is certainly one of the bigger challenges we're facing, at least here, and I think on many other wild and scenic rivers. Glacier National Park had a huge increase in visitation last year. We're up to 3.3 million. That was almost a 25% increase from the previous year. And with that comes congestion and bigger human waste issues, as well as impacts on various types of resources, from vegetation to fisheries to wildlife. Aquatic invasive species is a huge threat for this ecosystem. We so far are free of mussels, both the quagga and the zebra. But we do have non-native fish that we're actually trying to remove. So that's another threat to the river systems and the ecosystem that the Wild and Scenic River is trying to protect. And then, of course, climate change with all the warming temperatures is affecting the aquatic life for sure. Our non-native species our native species can't survive in warmer temperatures of these waters. So from a public land perspective, those are the things that come to mind for me. Privately, it's development along the shoreline, it's those sewer systems and other kinds of waste management systems, withdrawal of water and irrigation rights that come into play there. Those are the things that I can think of.
So thanks, Mary. I'll add a couple of things and then maybe open it to Zach and Mary, and maybe if we open up the phones, there are some folks on the phone like Steve Theed at the Niobrara and Hector Santiago, who deals with a lot of the rivers in the Midwest, is our regional steering committee representative that can identify some big issues, and Sarah Bursky, who works with the Partnership Wild and Scenic Rivers, particularly on the Sudbury, Ascot, and Concord rivers up in Massachusetts. Shoreline development, just letting rivers be rivers, and the natural flow regimes. And when I pointed out the water quality work that we're doing, what we're finding is that the water quality problems don't necessarily stem from the actual, within the river corridor itself, but are generally coming from upstream sources or potentially from atmospheric deposition. And so that some of the aquatic invasive issues that Mary highlighted is a challenge for everyone. We have transportation projects can be a big challenge. Many of you may have heard about the Stillwater Bridge issue up in Minnesota and Wisconsin a number of years ago, where there was a large new bridge project that had been proposed, and the Park Service was kind of in the center of it because of our wild and scenic responsibilities for reviewing these federally assisted water resources projects. A bridge is a water resources project if it's got piers in the water. And that was a massive new bridge project that was being proposed at the Park Service after 3 different tries and 2 different court decisions. Ultimately concluded that it would have a direct and adverse effect on the river values, particularly the scenic and recreational values at that location. And that was a situation where Congress then chose to override that Park Service determination that potentially could have prevented that bridge from being built. The bridge is now operational, and so that just basic infrastructure development is certainly a challenge for all the rivers. So, Zach, anything that you might want to add about Alaska challenges?
Yeah, one probably more of a unique challenge in Alaska is just general knowledge of the Wild and Scenic River Act and how it fits into land management. Because for our rivers in Alaska, the NPS rivers, they are most, except for one exception, they're fully enclosed within national park units and oftentimes designated wilderness. And even some of the folks who help manage the rivers aren't fully aware of what the act is and what it means. But that's a good problem to have, I guess, compared to millions of visitors and development.
Sarah, anything to add about Partnership Wild and Scenic Rivers?
Boy, you all did such a great job. I maybe just would add, with the Partnership Rivers, we're working so collaboratively with all of these different partners. Issues such as water withdrawals and wastewater treatment management. We're working with all of the municipalities and the different levels of government that are managing the water withdrawal or the permitting. And so it's wherever you have that much process involved, it can be slow, and it really is people focused. And so that brings with it its own set of challenges.
Great. Okay, so we've got some questions that have been submitted, so I want to make sure we get through this list and hopefully have some time to open up the phone lines for additional questions. Okay, so let's go quick here. Does Canada have an equivalent river system program?
No, not like this, and that's been one of the difficulties.
Okay. Are you aware of other countries that have adopted a similar law to the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act? And if so, which countries, where can one get information about those laws? So
the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act in the U.S. is really considered the standard for, it's kind of the ultimate for Wild and Scenic River protection. The Interagency Wild and Scenic River Coordinating Council has gotten inquiries from a number of other countries who are exploring the possibility of establishing systems. There's a special interest both in the Balkans as well as in China, and there's continuing collaboration with those groups. The Nature Conservancy is also actively involved in helping to establish strong, comprehensive river protection programs. It's my understanding that the European Union has some, perhaps some stronger protections for some of its rivers that has, a little bit more, their definitions for what they consider and the evaluations that are done on rivers is maybe a little bit more updated and comprehensive in considering natural flow regimes as part of the review for water resources projects there. But, that's something that I'm personally interested in learning a little bit more about, and I don't have, a good source for you at this point.
Okay. What's personally been the most successful example of collaboration when managing designated wild and scenic rivers?
So I would give that one to you, Sarah, given the overall successes of the Partnership Wild and Scenic Rivers, and perhaps I know you're relatively new to the program, but perhaps a highlight of something that's happening up in your world.
Wow. So to have to choose among our 13 partnership rivers, I probably am not in a position to do that. And so I'll say a few words, and then Joan, if one particular story comes to mind, chime in with that. But the river that I manage, the Sudbury, Assabet, and Concord, is now about to hit 20 years of the designation, and we've got very deep relationships with the land conservation organizations in this region, with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service managing some of the refuges in this region, everyone from local small nonprofits to the major watershed organization and the major land conservation organization. So just a tremendous history of doing really good work together in the region on invasive species, on wastewater permitting. The water quality of the Concord River has improved steadily over those 20 years, and while we don't have evidence to make the direct correlation, the influence of it being a designated river has certainly, we know anecdotally, had a lot of impact to help create that change, and certainly funding the water quality program here on the Suasco. So a little not fair because I talked about my river, but Joan, is there another story among the these truly collaborative partnership rivers that you would highlight?
Yeah. So I guess the other one that I would point to as a recent success, the Musconetcong in New Jersey is one of these partnership wild and scenic rivers, and they've been doing a lot of, this was a river that was developed with a lot of mill dams over its history, and they have been systematically working with the owners of these dams and removing them, and they just, in the last couple of years, they removed the first dam on the up from the estuary, from where the river flows into the Delaware River, and the shad are back. Within a season, the shad came back and were migrating further upstream. So a lot of restoration work is part of that. Another highlight would be that the National Park Foundation, as part of the 50th anniversary for both the rivers and trails, is offering grants for not just the rivers in parks, but also for these partnership wild and scenic rivers where we have some fundamental administrative responsibilities. So that's good news.
Great. Can you speak to the issues of the Buffalo National River and animal agriculture, and what, if any, plan there is to restore water quality there?
Well, I would really like to punt that one to Hector Santiago, who is our Midwest Wild and Scenic River representative who works closely with all the rivers in his region. The Buffalo is actually not a designated Wild and Scenic River, although it does have these Wild and Scenic River-like protections within it. I know that the Midwest region has been having a lot of conversation about how to deal with these confined animal feedlot operations. And Hector, is there, the 30-second soundbite that you want to add about the buffalo and what the plan is to improve and restore water quality?
Well, a big part of the plan, I guess the one thing I'd say about the whole buffalo CAFO issue that's important with respect to river management and wild and scenic rivers is that idea that it's so important to be proactive and connected to external partners, to your sister agencies, for example, your EPA, have a relationship with a good relationship with your state water quality management agencies, because when these issues come up, and it's something that in our region we've started to discuss better strategies as to how to address these kinds of big ticket threats like a CAFO within 6 miles of a scenic river in a karst region of in a karst environment. What we found ultimately is that those relationships, being in the game and engaged early on, really makes a difference. So that we're not basically catching up on, for example, in the case of the CAFO here, and I'm almost done with 30 seconds here, with the case of the CAFO here, a lot of environmental compliance and a lot of the environmental documentation happened without the knowledge of the park, or vice versa. The bottom line is there's a drop in communication, and I think so. Right now, we're kind of figuring out how to ultimately, establish protocols as to what kind of water quality information we want to have gathered, so that we can better articulate our water quality issues and our expectations for the river, while at the same time, those relationships are so important because ultimately, especially in a quasi-regulatory environment, right? Some parks are more comfortable working with regulations, the Clean Water Act, the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act, and others. If you come in at the 11th hour, it's a very hard situation to deal with. So I guess I'll leave it there. Hello?
We lose Brian.
All right, we're back. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Don't worry. All right, so we're going to post Joan and Mary's presentations or PowerPoint to our internal Park Service Connected Conservation Toolkit. For those of you not with the Park Service, if you want to send an email to me or to Joan, we can send it to you that way. Up on the screen, though, is the contact list. Joan, do you want to?
Yeah, so these are the regional contacts that we have, and this information is available on the Wild and Scenic River Program website, nps.gov/WSR.
All right. Section 7 gives us responsibilities on segments and tributaries above the Wild and Scenic River. How do we evaluate that, or how do we determine how far is too far?
So there's a different standard that is applied under Section 7 for projects that are upstream, downstream, or on tributaries of designated portions of the river. The standard is whether the project has the potential to invade or diminish or unreasonably diminish, depending on whether it's a designated river or a study river, But for designated rivers, the standard is the potential to invade or diminish. And that diminish is limited to scenic, recreational, fish, or wildlife values. And typically, the kinds of projects would be dams, upstream diversion structures, or other water resources projects that are visible from the river. So, and I see that question's from Jeff Bennett, and be happy to talk with you in greater detail about that at any time, Jeff.
All right. Has there been any efforts with tribes to use traditional ecological knowledge in river management? Good one for you, Mary.
We are using, we have sought out, yes. The quick answer to that is yes. We've actually done quite an extensive ethnographic survey of the Flathead Wild and Scenic River in regards to the relationship with the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribe. And so we're working through that. There is always room, of course, for more to happen. And we would like, since our tribes are actually connected with tribes in Canada, we've been reaching out to those tribes located in the provinces as well. But it's there's some work going on, but there's always room for more.
So I don't have any specific examples of that. I could tell you the story of the Wolf River, which was designated in 1968, one of the original rivers that were included in the national system. And I think that has the Park Service back in those days went ahead without a lot of tribal consultation to develop a management plan. When they presented that plan to the tribe said, "Thank you very much, but no thank you. We'll continue to manage our river as we have been for millennia." And you know, that we maintain that kind of relationship with them, that it's basically their management of the Wolf River in Wisconsin.
And Joan, just to add to that, this is Hector. I visited the Wolf River a couple years ago, and it's in just a beautiful place. And I think a lot of credit goes to the Menominee tribe in the way that they've established no-build corridors and managed the forest out there. So.
All right, folks, it is 4 o'clock Eastern time. It looks like there's a couple more questions we didn't quite get to. So if those folks want to email me or Joan or Mary, we can get back with you. Although that Yukon Charlie question might be a tough one to answer in a short email. You might want to give Joan a call on that one.
Well, I would say maybe talk to Zach here about that question. But yeah, so.
Yeah. All right. Nice move. Zach. And to you. All right, so thanks again to Zach and Mary and Joan and Sarah and Hector and everyone else. I'm sorry we didn't get around to being able to open up the phone lines to everyone else. Clearly, maybe we can do another presentation on some aspect of wild and scenic rivers in the future, because there's clearly a lot of interest.
So just one thing, and the end of October, the River Management Society is holding a symposium. It's, you know, in part recognition for the 50th anniversary. It's being held in Vancouver, Washington, and there will be a lot of wild and scenic river training as part of that event. So take a look at that.
Awesome. All right. Our next webinar for the Connected Conservation webinar series is August 29 at 3 o'clock Eastern time. And our presenters will be from the Wildlife Conservation Society, and they're going to be talking about wildlife fencing and the path of the pronghorn as a case study. It should be really fascinating. And with that, thanks everyone. have a great rest of your week.